Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good. What does it mean to belong? I want you to think about a place or a group where you feel like you belong. Maybe it's your hometown and you feel it as soon as you see the welcome sign at its border. Maybe it's a friend group and you feel it as soon as you embrace them at dinner. Maybe it's your family and you feel it each time you walk through your door. Where is it that you feel like you belong? Do you have a place in mind? Now, what about that place or that group makes you feel like you belong? Do you feel like you can be yourself? Do you feel safe? Do you feel connected? My guess is you answered yes to all of those questions. And while work may never be the top place you feel belonging, you can feel like you can be yourself, like you're safe, and like you're connected to your work and to your team. But what if this doesn't happen organically? And what if we actually have to work to create a space like this? That's when we need a belonging blueprint, a tested method for creating connection among your teams. And that's exactly what today's guest, Abigail Finck, is going to share with us. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Abigail is dedicated to fostering a new type of leadership in our world and enabling people to experience a profound sense of belonging and create lasting impact in all areas of life and work. With a BA in psychology and studio art from Gettysburg College, Abigail seamlessly blends academic knowledge with practical experience. In addition to founding and running Sojourn, she has made significant contributions as a guest lecturer at Columbia University, spearheaded the viral Coney 2012 campaign, developed content strategies to support modern recovery in the sobriety space, and served as creative director at an international educational company, promoting empathy and awareness across diverse populations. Her extensive experience, storytelling skills, ability to connect with people, and fierce belief in human potential uniquely position her to support individuals and teams on transformational learning development. Abigail works with clients across a wide spectrum of roles and industries, partnering with VC-backed startup founders, Grammy award-winning musicians, C-suite executive entrepreneurs, larger corporations, NGOs, dedicated parents, and more. This diversity gives her a unique ability to communicate effectively, adapt to varied challenges, and lead transformative change in dynamic environments. And I can't wait to learn from Abigail today. Abigail, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. What a beautiful introduction.
Thank you. I am so excited to talk about belonging. I think this is overdue on the podcast. And I'm so excited to just learn about creating this connection at work.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing I like to do before diving into the topic is to learn a little bit about you. I think we all have such unique career journeys, and it just becomes this beautiful tapestry that leads us to where we are. So tell us a little bit about your career journey. How did you get here?
Yeah, thank you so much for framing it that way. I agree that there's sometimes this like nonlinear path that we take. And in the moment, some of it can feel disconnected, but I've always said, never one for fitting in boxes. And some of my journey might feel disconnected from the outside, but for me, it really has all been deeply rooted in my belief in people's inherent power, their potential, their possibility. And so I studied psychology and studio art at Gettysburg College. And early in my career and right out of college, I actually started working at a global advocacy organization, nonprofit called Invisible Children. And I was part of a team that brought this Project Coney 2012, which is arguably one of the first viral grassroots campaigns that we've seen in the nonprofit space for sure, but part of the team that brought that to life. And I think that taught me a lot about a group of young individuals who believe deeply in something and the power that they have to create a difference. And it was a really interesting kind of first job out of college. And from there, I began designing and facilitating programs for another global nonprofit that was focused in the Middle East, North Africa, and US that was all about fostering empathy and understanding amongst the world's youth and really going like across divides. So looking at our deepest differences and distance that were between young people in those regions and having uncommon conversations about those. And I was there for about almost a decade, a little bit under that. And while I was there, pretty young on a leadership team, and my CEO was a godsend. Really, she was like, listen, I can manage you, but I can't develop you. And you're at a prime age to do that. And I got myself a executive coach in that moment, and it introduced this whole other world for me. And that's when I kind of went on a journey to start my own business, become a coach myself. And as I was building that and studying to become a coach, I worked for a few impact-driven startups and built and now run my business Sojourn, as you mentioned. So I've been doing that for the last many years. And it's designed really to offer individuals and teams, and hopefully in the future, even communities, the opportunity to tap into their inherent power and possibility. So bringing me right back to that first point of the belief that has driven all of the work I've done. And I guess I'll share with Sojourn in particular, we offer one-on-one coaching, consulting, workshops and trainings, and group coaching for teams, and helping with kind of more bespoke offerings for larger teams, whether that's offsites, retreats, or even, like custom projects to support effectiveness and belonging and communication within organizations.
I love that. I didn't know all the details of your career journey, and it's pretty special to think about. From your nonprofit experience, from your now coaching and consulting experience, I'm sure you've seen a lot of workplaces, a lot of teams, a lot of challenges, a lot of successes when it comes to creating that sense of connection. I'm curious, based on your experiences, why is this an important conversation for us to have? Why is belonging important in the workplace?
Yeah, I love that question. I think there's kind of two sides to it. So first, human connection and belonging, to me, they're not nice to haves. They're rooted in our fundamental human needs as people. And when we think about workplaces, we're groups of humans organized around usually a shared goal or business objective. And when our needs are met and when we're feeling fulfilled at a human level, our ability to work and collaborate together only enhances. So there's that for sure. And then I think more from the practical side of my experience, regardless of the country or the time zone, the title, the level of seniority, or the zeros in someone's bank account, the industry you work in, there's a thread that connects all of us. And I really believe that it is our need to belong. We are designed to connect. We are designed to empathize and belong to ourselves and one another. So that's another piece that when we have that, it drives positive results in the long term. And without it, we lose our way a little bit, right? And relationships fracture, creativity stalls, inefficiency efficiencies kind of creep up and burnout thrives, which are all things that, you very clearly know. And any of your listeners also know. It's like relationships matter, our innovation matters, and our ability to stay, to be progressing towards our goals, all are mission critical.
Absolutely. I know I talk a lot about relationships, just generally on LinkedIn, all the places that I am showing up. And it sometimes feels like a little bit of an anomaly in L&D to talk so much about relationships. But to your point, this feeling of belonging, it impacts everything else. So one of the things that I have found is that many organizations don't intentionally focus on creating that belonging. There is an expectation that if you hire good people and they're working together, right, things will just happen naturally. But that's not always the case. It doesn't always happen naturally. And so I mentioned in the intro that sometimes you need that belonging blueprint, that kind of method or map for how to create that connection. So what is the belonging blueprint and how can we create this connection at work?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We're always learning every day and making tweaks, but I designed the belonging blueprint as a dynamic framework that's really designed to foster environments where people can genuinely feel valued, they can feel connected, they can feel empowered. And to your point, relationships are flourishing and they're encouraged, and we're connected to like what we're up to at work actually is interdependent with all of the relationships we hold in that space. And, I think we can leave this one out and it might be the most important, but including the relationship we have with ourselves. And the belonging blueprint is really, it revolves around 4 key pillars. And I won't bore you with too many of the details, but how I organize it, I think is helpful and kind of like a little cheat sheet. So each of the pillars the first one is curiosity. The second is true communication, I'll say. And I mean communication, that's a word people throw around, but I'm talking about active listening. I'm talking about how we share ideas, how we listen. Let me go back to the pillars again. The belonging blueprint really revolves around these 4 key pillars that I think are a really great cheat sheet for people to remember. And so the 4 pillars of the belonging blueprint are 1, curiosity, 2, communication, 3, commitment. And I mean commitment to action when I say commitment. And then 4 is consistency. And this combination, I think, allows us to unearth what's working, what's not working, allows us to deeply connect and be in relationship with each other, ourselves, our work. Being in action gives us a way to practice and keep things moving forward and building trust. It's a way of being. And then the consistency is really key because spaces of deep connection and belonging in the workplace or anywhere in our life don't just happen, to your earlier point. It takes intentional action and commitment and choice.
So I'm really curious, which is a funny way to start this statement, about curiosity. Because I think that's such an undervalued attribute that people can bring to themselves, to their relationships with others, to their work. And so I'm curious, what does that look like as a pillar?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for highlighting it. So for me, curiosity is the building block that allows you to lay the foundation for understanding. And if we don't have understanding, where do we go? How do we build, create something new? And so I think tactically, there's some things like brave questions, right? I always say I'm not necessarily here to create a safe space, but actually a brave space where you can feel safe to show up with what you have. So questioning is like powerful questions, brave, powerful questions is a really kind of integral piece of that and really allows teams to explore perspectives. You started this podcast with, what does belonging mean to you? That's an example that invites a new, deeper, different conversation for someone's day that might be listening to this. I always love discovery sessions. And then I think organizationally, there can be culture audits or I like to call them culture, communication, and consistency audits. So looking across all of those different aspects of the business to really just assess how are organizational norms or values shaping belonging and identifying different opportunities for growth. Some organizations do it really well and it's fine tuning. Some organizations don't do it at all. And there's a really quick, big, fast win. So I think that's another piece. And, this kind of bleeds into the communication pillar, but I think listening, when you're truly curious, you're assuming you don't have the answer and that there's something to learn from whoever's in front of you in a conversation, whether that's your boss or the janitor or a customer or a donor.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective. When I think about spaces that I've been in where, we're trying to create this brave space where people can ask these big, powerful questions, it sometimes feels uncomfortable for people at first. And I think that's normal. We're not necessarily used to, asking these powerful questions. And so creating that space, right, can be challenging. And allowing people, encouraging people to lean into it can be challenging sometimes as well. What have you found to be the biggest challenges that teams face when trying to do this, when trying to create this connection and a sense of belonging?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think building off of kind of where you started that question is there is a fear of vulnerability. And that might be because maybe a previous or past experience, or even the realities of your current workplace, you might not actually feel safe to do that. Or personally, maybe you don't like to divulge too much about yourself. And I think that is kind of at the individual level. But when you look at kind of across organizations, some of the challenges that I often see are, misaligned leadership priorities. So often, and unfortunately, I think more often than any of us would like, belonging initiatives really feel secondary to immediate business goals. They're not thought of as kind of equal in a lot of ways. And I don't think, you were talking earlier about, if I hire good people, this will take care of itself. I totally believe that organizations should have dedicated, whether it's coaches or consultants or roles within their teams that are focusing and paying attention to this. I think that is a requirement of modern business. And at the same time, I'm all for being 100% responsible for the world that I want to see and the world that I want to create. So individuals, it's like, we can't wait for those departments or those initiatives. Like if it's up to me or if it's to be, it's up to me is one of my favorite sayings. And so there's ways to create it every day, but that can cause tension between individuals that if they're trying to foster that and they're in an organization that doesn't value that, it can be difficult. Time is another big one I hear a lot. People feel like it's too much work to do. It is too vulnerable. It is too uncomfortable. And where is that going to fit in with my busy work day too? Sometimes I feel like there's a challenge around overlooking diversity. And I'd be curious on your thoughts about this too. Sometimes we mistake inclusion for sameness rather than actually valuing unique perspectives and making sure unique, diverse perspectives and thoughts are brought to the table. And then I think a lot of organizations fall into the category of like, there are really good intentions and it's hard to create sustained action over time, which then erodes trust, which then goes back to where we started, where it's like, oh, I don't know if I trust that I can actually show up with my vulnerability here and still have that not impact my job performance, my compensation, or my relationship with my boss. So there's a lot to wade through for sure. Was that clear? Is there anything
Yeah.
that it brings up for you?
Yeah, I agree with all of the things that you share. There are so many challenges to this work, but it's so worth it, which we'll come back to your point about overlooking diversity. I think in my experience, it's not necessarily an intentional process of overlooking diversity, but that so many people are looking for commonality because that's how they're used to building relationships. And in that process of really focusing on the similarities, we tend to downplay some of those differences. And those differences are oftentimes what make us stronger as a team and more innovative as a team and things like that. So, definitely a challenge to get people to, I guess, shift their focus in a way, shift their perspective in a way from just looking for the commonality and looking at those differences and celebrating those differences.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we've been trained to do that in many cases.
Yeah.
So,
And it's actually like the science of our brain. It's actually, we are designed to look for commonality to find tribe or safe space for survival purposes and
right.
to
But
like
to your
separate.
point, brave space is where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, fully agree with your list of challenges. And it probably doesn't even touch on all of them, but these are real. They're real challenges. They're not just perceived challenges. It takes effort, it takes intentionality to do this work anyway. And so, with that in mind, can you share a little bit about the results that you've seen from the individuals and the organizations who have leaned in and said, you know what, I see the challenges and we're going to do it anyway?
Yeah. I love that. Well, I think the first result that I'm always really present to is our at work or in this project or in this relationship, we're having some of our most innate human needs met. Like when that's happening, we're healthier, we're happier, which of course ripples out into our team, our company, and not to mention our kitchen tables and our homes, which is really important because we spend a lot of time at work. And then I experience a lot of leaders that I work with experiencing much lower stress and improved relationships when they start to prioritize connection to themselves and others and how to foster this deeper belonging at home feeling with themselves and their teams. And one client comes to mind in particular who's a leader at a startup, and he's been practicing a lot of presence and deep connection with self. And not only has his work gotten better and is he less stressed doing his work, his boss, the founder of his organization that he's helping to run, is recognizing him at a different level. He's having an easier time influencing the path that the organization is taking. And he is able to kind of handle his nervous system in a healthy way. Those are positive results for sure. And then in his personal life, he's seeing like a reduction in a chronic condition that was impacting his eyesight and his eye. That's like dissipating due to his lack of stress and inflammation lowering in his body. And he's running a marathon and his speed is improving. And so it's just a fun example of how this prioritization, not only it helps every part of us and every part of our work, which I think is really important. And then another client that comes to mind right now is a woman who is she's at a high level organization, new leader of many hundreds of people. And she is getting to kind of restructure the department, how they're going to do their work, and is really investing in kind of individual assessments for strengths, doing a culture audit. She's investing in her own prioritization of growth. And in her first quarter, she's being recognized across her organization as an effective leader in change management. And the work that her team is producing is higher. And what I can pinpoint is that she's so focused on one, leaning into her team's strengths and also creating a space where all voices are brought to the table in a way that's not overwhelming, but allows for innovative thinking and new ways of approaching it. She's kind of thinking outside the box. But anyway, those are kind of specific examples. And the other kind of more broad stroke example that I can think of is teams that embrace belonging, I think just statistically, and I've seen it myself, report higher morale and more effective decision making. So that allows teams to move faster and collaboration to go up.
Yeah, so many benefits. And when I think about the first leader, the startup leader that you shared, I mean, I was literally getting chills when you're talking about all of the different ways that he's seeing benefits just from being able to create this connection, with himself and with others. And then the second leader, I think that's what every organization wants, right? We want a leader that can come in, can be really reflective, can listen to what's going on in the organization, and then can lead, usher in change, but in a way that is just so in tune with the people that you're leading. And so I don't know an organization that would not want that kind of result. So I really appreciate you sharing those two specific examples as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that just in listening to you, what came up for me is I think when fear or upset or overwhelm or emotions come into the picture, which they do because we're people and usually we're working on big, important things, people's ability to digest those emotions, I like to say metabolize the overwhelm, the fear, whatever emotion it is, and then make the best decision from there, from an open and non-reactive place, but a responsive place, is so valuable for teams. So it's like we put down our proving or our being right or all the ways we armor up when we feel like we belong to something bigger than ourselves and trust ourselves in whatever space we're in. And so I think that's another important piece and kind of benefit of this type of work is leaders and teams gain a sense of assuredness, and then they have the ability to respond instead of react.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And in a nonprofit setting, too, people are typically already really connected to the mission. They're already connected to what the organization is trying to accomplish. And that burnout comes from that overextension.
Mm-hmm.
But what if, right? What if we could create this connection in these relationships and that sense of belonging so that they feel really good themselves and then really good within the teams that they're working in? I mean, how much stronger would they be as they're operating whatever their role is and trying to advance that mission? So I mean, it's really important stuff. So along those lines, how can a nonprofit person get started with this process? So, my audience is learning and development. They're often creating training, they're creating leadership development type solutions for their organizations, either for staff or volunteers or association members and things like that. So how can they get started with this process? What's one thing they can do today?
Yeah, I love that question. Okay, so I would say one, start small and get curious. So going back to where we started with the belonging blueprint, like even just asking yourself and journaling or voice noting to yourself and then your team, what does belonging mean to me? How am I, or to you, if you're asking someone else, and how do you experience that at work or how things like, how do you relate to human connection? Do you feel lonely? When do you feel like when you're part of something, what parts of you shows up? So there's so many ways to just get curious with the people that you're already working with. I think another opportunity is really identifying some quick wins. And one of my favorite ways to do this is really a practice of acknowledging and celebrating contributions of your teammates in a meaningful way. I like to do it, like I would say, for anyone listening, who can you acknowledge this week? Pick a few members of your team and intentionally acknowledge them, whether that's one-on-one or, pulling them aside at the office, or if it's a quick Slack message. One of my favorite rituals that I used to do, a startup I worked at, was on Fridays, we had a celebration channel, and we would make sure that everyone on the team was meaningfully acknowledged for something that they created or contributed that week. People were able to interact with it. And there was an element of sharing that out loud and creating that culture. But it was one of my favorite things on Fridays at 3 p.m. Like we spent 15 minutes, it was on our calendar, And we just honored what we created that week. And that, you can do at any moment of any day, publicly or not. I think another thing that I love to remind people is like, just remember that this is about consistency. Belonging isn't built overnight. It's a series of intentional actions that over time create a lasting impact and trust, really, that then feeds into a larger culture of this. And then I think given the line of work that you're in, there's also the ability to reach out for support and let others help you, right? If you're ready to do a more serious audit or reach out to have hands-on support, there's so many consultants, coaches, organizational planners that can support you with a plan that makes sense for you and your team. And then one last thing that I'll share is I have like some of my favorite, I call them belonging cues, or the secret language of connection is kind of how I like to talk about them. But simple things like maintaining eye contact when you're talking to someone and showing that you're engaged and value what the person has to say. I do whole trainings on complete and active listening. So how do you nod and mirror body image and give verbal affirmations like I see or I understand, to make people feel heard and that they're understood, and actually to do that authentically, not as a performative measure, which is a very important distinction. Another belonging cue that I love is using inclusive language of we instead of I, creating spaces where we are part of something bigger than just ourselves and others feel that. The acknowledgement is another big one. And when we can, right, we're living in a pretty digital virtual world right now, but physical proximity, in non-invasive ways, physical closeness, like an offsite or a retreat or time together, can also create and foster that sense of togetherness, and arguably has become more important given where we are in the workforce with remote work. So that was a lot, but I hope it was helpful, and feel free to omit whatever is too much.
Yeah, no, this is great. It gives people a lot of options for how to get started. To your point, right? You can start small just by being curious and asking questions of yourself or of people on your team, but then also thinking through what are those quick wins. And you gave a lot of examples there that what people can do, and they can come up with their own ideas as well, because sometimes that quick win needs to be tailored to what they're experiencing in their organizations. And then also to your point, they can get help. They don't have to do this by themselves. I think so many times we feel like we have to solve it all, and we don't. We can get help. So that's a great point as well. Abigail, you've given us so much to think about on this episode. You've given us things that we can take action on right away, which I always appreciate. And I'm sure listeners do too. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for showing up and being fully present in this space with me. And yeah, thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been such a gift.
Abigail did a wonderful job of sharing what is belonging and why should we care about creating connection. And also, how do we do this? It can feel so overwhelming to try to create this sense of belonging. But belonging is something that matters. We all want to feel seen, heard, and valued. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we can be ourselves. And we want to feel connected. And our ability to intentionally create a sense of belonging at work, that impacts the organization's culture, the individual employees, their families, their work, and the people we serve. It's worth it to navigate the challenges and to dedicate the resources to creating connection at work. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good. Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.